What if some of Hollywood's most famous deaths were never meant to be understood? What if the official reports weren't the full story, but carefully crafted endings to protect something bigger? Behind the glamour of old Hollywood, there was a system. A machine that didn't just create stars, it controlled the narrative. Even in death. And when you look closer at those death certificates, they start to feel less like answers and more like questions. Marilyn Monroe. Let's start with the name everyone knows, Marilyn Monroe. In 1962, Monroe was found dead in her Los Angeles home at just 36 years old. The official cause was a barbiturate overdose, and the ruling was recorded as probable suicide. Not confirmed, not absolute, just probable. And that single word is where everything begins to unravel. Because Monroe's death didn't come with clarity, it came with inconsistencies. There were no definitive signs showing exactly how she consumed the pills. Reports over the years raised questions about the amount found in her system, the timeline of events, and even the role of people close to her. Then came the whispers, allegations of connections to powerful political figures, suggestions that her personal life intersected with people who had far more to lose than she did. Theories emerged that her death might not have been intentional at all, but something that had to be presented that way. Now think about it. How does an official record leave room for doubt? How does something as final as death get labeled with uncertainty? That word, probable, didn't close the case. It opened it, and decades later, it still hasn't been fully closed. Natalie Wood. If Monroe's case planted doubt, Natalie Wood's made it impossible to ignore. In 1981, Wood vanished during a yacht trip off the coast of California. Hours later, her body was found in the water. The initial ruling was straightforward: accidental drowning. A tragic incident. Case closed. Except, it wasn't. Years later, the case was reopened. New details surfaced. Witness statements didn't align. Bruises were noted on her body, injuries that raised more questions than answers. And eventually, something rare happened. Her death certificate was changed. The new ruling read, drowning and other undetermined factors. Undetermined factors. Two words that quietly admit something critical. Something wasn't fully explained. Her husband, actor Robert Wagner, was later named a person of interest. Not charged, not convicted, just part of a story that didn't fully make sense. And that's what makes this case so unsettling. Not just the mystery, but the fact that even official records had to step back and admit uncertainty. Because when a death certificate changes decades later, it's not just correcting the past, it's exposing how incomplete the original story might have been. Thelma Todd. Go back further to 1935. Actress Thelma Todd is found dead in her car, inside a closed garage above a cafe she partly owned along the Pacific Coast Highway. The official cause? Carbon monoxide poisoning. At first glance, it seems simple. A tragic accident. Maybe she left the engine running to stay warm. Maybe something mechanical went wrong. It happens. But then, the details begin to surface, and the story starts to feel less comfortable. Her body reportedly showed bruising. There were signs that didn't fully align with a straightforward accident. Some accounts suggested she had been locked out of her apartment earlier that night. Others questioned how she ended up in that specific garage at all. And almost immediately, rumors began to spread. Connections to organized crime, powerful figures in Hollywood, and a lifestyle that may have placed her in situations far more dangerous than the public ever knew. Was it an accident? A suicide? Or something far more deliberate? No one could prove it. And that's what makes the case linger. Because when a situation exists in that gray area, too suspicious to ignore, but too unclear to confirm, it creates a kind of discomfort that institutions don't handle well. Especially in an industry built on control, image, and narrative. So what happens? The case gets simplified. The cause is finalized. The file is closed, not because every question has been answered, but because uncertainty isn't something the system is designed to live with. And so, officially, it ends there. But unofficially, the questions never stopped, and nearly a century later, they still haven't. George Reeves. In 1959, George Reeves, the man millions recognized as Superman, was found dead in his home from a gunshot wound. The official ruling came quickly. Suicide. Simple, direct, final. But almost immediately, the story began to fracture under scrutiny. Those present in the house that night gave accounts that didn't fully align. The timing of events felt inconsistent. Physical evidence raised questions, details that, depending on how you looked at them, didn't neatly support a self-inflicted act. And then there were the personal dynamics, relationships, tensions, motives that may or may not have existed, but were impossible to ignore once mentioned. The more people looked at the case, the less it seemed to fit into a single, clean explanation. Some believed Reeves took his own life, overwhelmed by career struggles and personal issues. Others believed the scene had been staged, and some thought the truth existed somewhere in between, messier, more complicated, and far less convenient. But none of those possibilities made it into the official record. Because once a conclusion is written down, once it's stamped, filed, and declared final, it becomes more than just a statement. It becomes the version of reality that's accepted, repeated, and preserved. Changing that version requires more than doubt. It requires proof. And in this case, proof never came. So the record remained unchanged. Suicide, a single word that closed the case but never truly ended the conversation. The Black Dahlia. Then there's Elizabeth Short, the woman history would remember as the Black Dahlia. Her 1947 murder wasn't just mysterious, it was deeply disturbing. When her body was discovered in Los Angeles, it was so severely mutilated, so deliberately positioned, that early witnesses reportedly believed it was a mannequin. It didn't look real, it looked staged, like a scene constructed for shock value. Except it wasn't, it was real. And it was brutal. The case exploded into the media almost instantly. Headlines turned her into a symbol, a story, a spectacle. And with that attention came chaos. Tips flooded in, suspects emerged, dozens of them. Some confessed, many falsely. Theories multiplied, each one more elaborate than the last, but none of them led to a definitive answer. Investigators chased leads that went nowhere. Evidence was incomplete. Witnesses contradicted each other. And over time, the case became less about solving a crime and more about trying to make sense of something that refused to be understood. And then, slowly, it shifted. From investigation to legend. Because when a case remains unsolved for long enough, it stops being just a crime. It becomes something else. A mystery people revisit. A story people reinterpret. A truth that feels like it's always just out of reach. No one was ever officially charged. No resolution was ever reached. And in this case, the death certificate didn't hide the truth. It simply acknowledged something far more unsettling. That the truth was never found. Completely gone. And maybe that's what makes this case different from all the others. Not that it was covered up, but that, despite everything, despite the attention, the effort, the urgency, it remained unsolved. And it still is. Some stories fade with time, but others refuse to stay buried, lingering between fact and mystery, waiting for someone to question what was never fully explained. And maybe that's the real truth about old Hollywood. Not everything was meant to be understood, only accepted. If you enjoyed uncovering these hidden secrets and want more deep, powerful videos like this, make sure to like and subscribe.